If you have a child or young person in your life, have you ever been frustrated with trying to get them to do what you think they ought to do or not do what you think they're not supposed to do? I'm Dr. Carol, and thank you for joining me on this episode. That whole question, I think, needs to be reframed. It's not so much getting that child or young person to do or not do the, quotes, right thing as it is, helping them become the person that God created them to be. Well, that's a perspective that my guest today has been working in for, a lot of years. Dr. Tim Elmore founded Growing Leaders 20 years ago. Prior to that, he was working with Dr. John Maxwell. Dr. Elmore is an author, has written several amazing books. His Growing Leaders organization brings a bunch of resources to help parents, schools, teachers, etc., help young people do exactly that. His latest book, I Can't Wait. You'll want to wait and find out about that in just a second. But in helping young people become who God created them to be, it's not primarily about tasks, although there are important tasks to be done. But in this conversation with Dr. Elmore, we talk about what's a little deeper, things like creativity and passion and leadership. I know you will want to pay attention. So welcome, Dr. Tim Elmore. Dr. Tim Elmore, I am grateful and honored. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Good to be with you, Carol.
I have followed your work for a few years. I first heard you at a Catalyst conference. I don't know, that must be, 4 years ago or so now. And I remember being so impressed at just the perspective you bring to children and, frankly, adults interacting with young people, whether that's in the home or school or whatever. And I'm just thrilled that we now finally get a chance to talk like this.
Good. Well, it's so important, isn't it, to connect adult generations with kids and make sure we build a bridge, not a wall. And so
Yes.
often the time we're in our silos with our own age group or whatever. And so this is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about your latest book here in a second, but to get there, the generation that you and I are in is very different than the generation that's coming up now. What do you see as some of the differences that they're having to face, or their perspective on the world that may be different from what people like you and I would just naturally think about?
Yeah, well, that's a huge question, one
Yeah.
that deserves probably an hour of an answer, but let me just take a couple of minutes. Um, First of all, let me say, I believe that while the generation gap term has been around since the 1960s when John
Yeah.
Poppe came up with it, the gap between adults and kids has grown wider when the screens in our life went
Mm.
from public to private.
Oh,
So we had one screen in our house when I was growing up. It was a
yes.
television, the
Right.
black and white TV in the beginning. And we all gathered around and we all watched a show together, laughed together, talked together. We were
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, we've all got our little smartphone and we're
Mhm.
in our own silo. We're in our own echo chamber where we may know that our 17-year-old daughter has an Instagram account. We have no idea she has 6 Finsta accounts,
Wow.
fake
Yeah.
Instagram, where
Yeah.
she's developed personas and is interacting with people she doesn't even know. And so we're in our own echo chambers. And I'm afraid that even in a family, let's say, there can be different worlds that collide instead of collaborate sometimes. So anyway, I feel like the old and the young are divided in how we communicate and how we want to communicate with each
Yeah.
other. I talk to employers all the time that say, my Gen Z employee just ghosted me, meaning he didn't even say he was going to leave. He just left, or they want a text message instead of a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
So I think, Carol, the way I would summarize the challenge is just like if you and I hopped on a plane and we flew to another country,
Hmm.
as we stepped off that plane, we would know we're going to have to work harder to connect with people here because they
Yeah.
speak different language. They
Yeah.
have different customs. They have different values.
Yeah.
Bingo. I think the old and the young have different customs, values, and language. So we're going to have to commit. I'm going to do some work to meet with that 20 something or that teenager as
Yeah.
opposed to meeting with someone from my own demographic.
Yeah. That's a powerful perspective right there. Many of the people I talk with, and many of the audience that tends to be part of our program, they are all concerned about, okay, getting the kids to obey, whether they're teachers or parents
Yeah.
or whatever. Okay, I've got to tell them the right things to do. But that's not particularly helpful. It's not particularly working.
No, it isn't, whether it's in the family room or the classroom.
Yes.
And part of the reason is, this may be too philosophical, but the age of authority is dropping.
Mm.
And what that means is a young team member, let's say on a team at work, brings in a skill set and a knowledge about smart technology or apps or
Yeah.
social media platforms that a 58-year-old employer might not even know.
Yes.
So in yesteryear, we would just so honor and respect the elders who were over 75 years old because they'd been around and they knew more than everybody else.
Yeah.
Well, now that young whippersnapper, if I can say that, may come in with some insights. So I believe the key in families, work, school, we need the timeless insights that the old
Mm-hmm.
bring,
Mm-hmm.
but we need the timely intuition that the young bring. And if we can do a little reverse mentoring here and there,
Yes.
we pick up exactly what we need, but it's young
Mm.
and old learning from each other.
Yeah. Which in the family of God isn't that part of what God
Mm.
originally intended. I know you and I both share that belief.
Yeah, no
Um,
doubt about it. Yeah.
yeah. You have written some amazing books, and the latest, I can't wait. 52 stories of kids who changed the world that you can read together. What were you trying to do with I Can't Wait, Tim?
Well, kind of like what we just said, Carol, I have found that very often a parent and a child, for instance,
Yeah.
are not having the marvelous conversations that maybe I had with my mom and dad at dinner time back 50 years ago. So I wanted to create a tool that would bridge that gap. So these are 52 stories, one a week for a whole year, about a kid, 15, 12, 7 years old, 21 years old. It's kids ages 5 to 21
Mm-hmm.
that did something absolutely amazing. And it was an average kid. Nobody knew this kid, but
Yeah.
they did something amazing. So I'm picturing, let's just say at dinner time once a week, we actually sit down together and have dinner. There's a novel thought. And then we read a story together. Maybe we
Mm-hmm.
take turns reading, but here's Virgil or Lucy or Thomas or
Yeah.
Louis, but they've done something. And I'll be glad to share some stories if you'd like. But
Yes.
then it goes to 3 questions about that story. What can we pick up today that we could repurpose and apply in our lives? And then at the end of the chapter, there's actually a website that you can go to watch a video on
Mm.
this kid that changed the world back in 1999 or in 1809. So there are
Oh,
stories from
yeah.
histories as well as today. I had so much fun, Carol, putting it's 52 stories. I've been gathering them for more than 20 years now, and I just decided to curate them, put them in a resource for moms and dads and teachers and coaches and youth workers to use and really inspire.
Yeah.
By the way, isn't it true? Most of the stories we hear of kids today, it's bad news. It's a
Yes.
crime that was committed. It was a mass shooting. It was mental health issues. And I'm
Yes.
thinking, there's some great stuff going on that we won't hear about on CNN, but we need to hear them. So that
Yeah.
was my goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't read all the stories, but I've looked through and I've seen a few, and love you to share one or two that have been your favorite. One that I noticed was this boy in Africa that developed a way to get electricity to the
Yeah.
people that he lived around, and nobody taught him how to do that. He figured it out.
It was a short-term mission trip that he was on, and he noticed, these people were going without electricity. This is
Yeah.
amazing, and so he has a brain that I don't have. Thank God for the body of Christ, right? That
Yeah.
has hardwiring very differently. But he comes up with a way to generate electricity in this place that didn't have it. But you remind me of another story, the story of Anne. Anne was, I think, 16 years old when she had a Facebook pal that lived in the Philippines. So they're across the world.
Right.
Anne asked her buddy in the Philippines, "How you doing in school?" And her friend said, "Not so good. I'm flunking out." And she said, "Flunking out? You're smarter than I am. How could you flunk out?" And Anne discovered that her Facebook friend in the Philippines lived in a place where she had no electricity.
Wow.
And so when the sun went down, she couldn't do her homework.
Yeah.
And so she was flunking out, not because of her brain, but because of her incapacity to learn. So get this, Anne loved science. And she thought, I'm going to come up with an invention to help my friend. And Anne, literally, this is a true story. Anne came up with a flashlight that's powered by the body heat from your hand.
Wow.
So it doesn't need batteries. You just hold it up with your hand and you write with the other hand and you're doing your homework. And
Wow.
sent it over. Her friend's now passing. Anne won this incredible science award and a scholarship to college. But I'm thinking, this is going on and we will not hear this on the news. But we need to know this is what kids are doing. I'm telling you, they're way more innovative than I think I was at their age.
Yes.
Because they've got the smartphone and they're getting ideas.
Yeah.
We just need to kind of nudge them in the right direction and do something redemptive. So anyway, those are just a couple of quick stories that are kind of fun in the book.
Beautiful. And you've got 52 of these.
Yeah, exactly.
As you tell a couple of those stories, one of the things that occurs to me, people in the generation you and I may be in, Tim, are often concerned about peer pressure.
Yeah.
You're talking about helping these kids become leaders.
Yes.
And I'd like to give you a couple minutes to talk about that. So helping them learn, they don't have to follow their peers in a negative way. They can lead in a positive way. How do we help kids do that?
I think there's leadership possibilities in every single kid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I say that, I don't think they're all will become the CEO or the president of a company.
Right.
But I believe that leadership is really about solving problems and serving people. We love that phrase, solving problems, serving people. If you do that, you're going to lead something.
Yeah.
So we teach leadership with images. And my image for this one is thermostats and thermometers.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that both of those instruments have to do with the temperature, the climate.
Yeah.
But the big difference is a thermometer can only tell you what the temperature is. A thermostat actually sets a temperature.
Yeah.
I think if we were looking at a typical high school, most kids come into the high school as a thermometer their freshman year. I'm just looking around, wanting to reflect whatever the tone is here. I don't want to do something stupid here. So they wear what others wear, say what others say, do what others do. But I'm thinking God calls us to be that temperature setter.
Yeah.
That we're setting the tone. And if it needs to be heated up, we heat it up. If it needs to be calmed down, we calm it down. So the takeaway on this one, listeners, is I believe we become thermostats, not when we get a position, perhaps.
Yes.
It's when we live by values and we add value.
Okay.
So every thermostat person that I know has come up with a set of standards or values that they live by. And it may be above what my teacher asked, maybe above what my coach asked, but it's a set of standards. And everybody begins to respect me, even if they don't like me, because I live by this higher standard.
Yeah.
I also add value, meaning as I interact with other people, I'm not just in there to get, I'm in there to give. How can I add value to this conversation? Recommending a book, introducing them to somebody they ought to know, or something, word of encouragement. So we're trying to instill in kids to be thermostats and set the temperature in that school classroom or that football team or whatever. And we're meeting them all the time. 52 of them are in this book, but it's just so much fun. And Carol, I'll say what you're doing yourself. We're trying to change the narrative. We're changing the narrative of what we're thinking is going on out there and what's the norm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, bless you for doing that in this arena, Tim. It's huge. And even in the subtitle of your book, kids that change the world.
Yes.
And I think we minimize too much what young people can do. And that's your passion. And you've been saying that already just in the few minutes we've been talking here. To just push that leadership a little bit, what can adults do, whether it's parents or youth pastors or teachers or whatever? What can adults do to help draw that out of young people so they become leaders in important ways and not only followers, especially to peer pressure?
Yes, great question. Well, the first thing I think we need to do is take a step on the inside of our own minds as the parents, the adults that care. I have found, Carol, that there's 4 common pathways that students or kids step into influencing their world and leading their world. Let me give them to you real quick. And then
yes, please do. That's perfect, Tim.
Okay. I want you to have your antennas up, listeners, to maybe my child or my student or my football player has one of these. So pathway number one is some kids are just gifted to lead.
Mhm.
Those are the obvious ones. It's 1 out of 10 maybe, but they come out of their mother's womb and they just, oh my gosh, they're large and in charge. I worked for John Maxwell for 20 years. I think John came out of his mother's womb telling the nurses and doctors what to do in the delivery room.
Yep.
That's number one. And I think when we have a kid like that, we need to pull them aside and say, hey, Ted, or hey, Susan, you have a gift and you need to be using that gift, stewarding that gift for good purposes. You're going to influence one way or the other. You're going to set the temperature. I want to encourage you to set it well. Gifted to lead. The second way kids step into leadership, Carol, some are situated to lead. Situated. So here's my theory. I think the world is full of two kinds of leaders, and every kid fits into one of these two kinds. They're either a habitual leader or a situational leader.
Okay.
Okay, a habitual leader is the one I just talked about. They're gifted to lead. They lead out of habit. Okay, whatever team they're on, whatever group they're in, they tend to take over.
Yeah.
1 out of 10, maybe. The other 9 out of 10 of us are what I call a situational leader. We're the ones that look in the mirror and go, I'm not really a great leader, but put me in the right situation, one that matches my gifts, my passions, my talents, my strengths. In that one zone, I know what to do for some reason. I've never taken a class on that, and I know what to do. I'm thinking about that proverbial young, quiet boy that sits in the classroom, a wallflower, doesn't say a word. Suddenly you put him on the soundboard, he comes alive. What's happened to this kid, Well, he found his situation. So listeners, we've got to help those kids around us find their God-given situation.
Okay,
good. Naturally flow and they naturally influence. That's number two. The third way kids step into leadership, some of them are positioned to lead.
Yeah.
Meaning some are not going to have the audacity to step forward and say, let me take charge. They're going to have to be buttonholed and say, Todd, you need to lead this. And they won't step until they are asked. But when they're asked, they may rise to the occasion. I had a kid in my student group way back in San Diego years ago, Richard. Richard didn't want to lead anything. He was quiet, introverted. But when I started calling on him, he reluctantly stepped up. He started leading. And I think if Richard were here today in this conversation, he'd go, I didn't see it. But when Dr. Tim asked me to lead that thing, I stepped in. He saw it, not me, he would say. Okay, that's the first three. The fourth one is my favorite, Carol. I think some kids are summoned to lead.
Oh, wow.
And here's what I mean. It could be the Holy Spirit summoning but I think sometimes leadership begins with a negative emotion, not a positive one.
Okay.
Meaning they get upset that there's no Coke machine in the dining hall.
Yes.
Or mad that this injustice has happened over here. When I meet a kid that does that, I go, good, I'm glad you're mad. What do you mean? Well, it's better than apathy. Now, why don't you get up and do something? Well, I'm not a leader. You don't have to lead anybody. Just do something. Isn't it true when a kid steps up and does something, they often give permission to a bunch of others to step up with them and do something? So by summon to lead, I mean, it's a problem or a dilemma or some obstacle that they get sad or mad about.
Yes.
And we as a caring adult foster them to step up and do something about it. This happens all the time, just like Virgil in the book. Virgil was a middle school kid a few years ago who was playing video games at night, late at night. He heard a loud noise outside the window. He looked outside the window. A storm was coming in, but he assumed it wasn't that bad. Virgil was wrong. It was Hurricane Harvey coming in.
Yes.
Remember Hurricane Harvey back in Houston?
Yes. I'm in Texas, so yes, I remember Hurricane Harvey.
Know this. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, before he knew it, young Virgil, this cute little kid, 13 years old, was up to like his knees in water. It was gushing in. Well, I love the fact that Virgil did not wait for an adult to do something.
Yep.
He did not wait for permission from an adult to do something. He grabbed his phone, he grabbed his older sister, he grabbed his mama, and he ran them upstairs to get away from the rising waters. And that would have been an act of heroism itself, but it didn't stop there. When Virgil gets upstairs, he gets a friend from Kashan, his buddy, across the apartment complex, who says, Virg, we're in trouble over here. We're drowning. We need help. Virgil doesn't wait for an adult to do something, doesn't wait for permission, this is so powerful. He runs right back downstairs to his flooding apartment. He grabs an air mattress that he slept on at night and he uses it as a raft and he paddles over and he ends up saving Kashan and his family that evening. But you can imagine, as he's paddling back and forth, he hears the cries for help from other people in the apartment complex. Virgil spends the next several hours that evening not sleeping like most eighth graders would have been doing, but working. The police report that came out the next day said Virgil Smith saved 17 lives that night.
That's
As an
amazing.
eighth grade little kid. And I'm thinking, oh Lord, may their tribe increase.
Amen, brother.
I think
Yes.
it's out there, but we hear the bad news. And so, listeners, please, let's change our narrative. Let's begin with belief. They have some God-given seed inside of them. They're gifted in some way.
Yes.
Let's help them find some redemptive. I'm sorry I'm preaching here, but we've got to find a redemptive way to help them see something that they may not see yet and be summoned to lead. Yeah.
That is powerful. Dr. Tim, one of the things I kind of geek out on at times is brain science, neuroscience,
Yes, me
neurobiology.
too.
And some of what you're describing
Yeah.
is part of how we now scientifically understand things happen in the brain. You don't make a major brain change by just stuffing a bunch of facts or whatever. You're talking about fostering creativity, about opening pathways for young people to become rather
Yeah.
than giving them a list of tasks or behaviors.
Yes.
Incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it is. You're right. The neural pathways in our brain are so powerful in forming grooves or ruts, good
Yep.
or bad. And
Yes.
I think they can form the bad when maybe just nothing wrong with this, but maybe just get stuck watching video games or playing
Right.
video games and I'm saying we need to change those pathways that are being molded the first 20, 25 years. And this is one way to do it. Let's get
Yeah.
inspired with vision. Let's get up and try something, see what happens.
Yeah. Um, kind of the last topic area I want to get into for just a minute or two. Those who are regularly a part of our podcast know that I often talk about areas of sexuality, intimacy, relationships. And for any adult who cares about young people, this is probably an area you care about.
Yeah.
And it occurs to me that in this very area of helping to develop young people from the inside, that just railing about, the bad stuff or the bad peer pressure, or even just telling a bunch of stuff about what's good and bad. Maybe there's moments for that, but
Yeah.
what happens when you're not there? This is the kind of paradigm that seems to me can make a big difference in young people, whether it's about the area of sexuality or something else, but
Yeah.
it applies to that too. It occurs to me, if a young person has a sense of meaning and okay, they're leading, then some of those hooks
Mhm.
lose a bit of their power, and this can be a part of bringing them to some health.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, I would say while sexuality is a part of who we are, it's not the
Yes,
central theme of who
right.
we are.
Yes,
I think we're diverse.
absolutely, absolutely.
So I am hopeful that I'm painting a picture here. Maybe at bedtime, a young Erica reads a story with her mom and all of a sudden gets this big idea because at her school, that same problem existed. But now we just read a story and we answered some questions. Maybe we watched a video and now we're seeing something begin to stir inside. And maybe it's a year later that this
Sure.
all comes to
Okay.
fruition. But I think we are gatherers of stories in our brains.
Mm-hmm.
I'm offering 52 of them to you. So I'm thinking, I don't know if this is silly or not, but maybe a New Year's resolution, read a story a week, talk about it. Dinner time, bedtime, drive time, classroom time. I just feel like maybe we could realize some of the great imagination that's inside that could become reality if we became the vision casters for this next generation behind us.
Beautiful. You said we run on stories. Maybe that's a slight paraphrase, but we do. Human
Yeah,
brains run on stories,
it's
and
true.
what a great way
Yeah.
to address these important things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have loved reading them myself. We beta tested these stories with some families. One little girl, I think she's 8, her dad read a story with her. They talked about the questions, and she literally said, "Give me that." And she grabbed the book and she read through the rest of the weekend. She read all the stories, and she couldn't wait. But I thought, okay, that's what I'm looking for right there. So that was fun.
Well, Tim, just tell people where they can find I Can't Wait. We'll make sure there's links available, but just
Yeah.
let people know.
Okay, couple of places. Well, first of all, you can always go to Amazon if you don't
Yeah.
remember anything that we say here, and it's called I Can't Wait. But we have a special site that's got extra stuff on it. So it's ican'twaitbook.com. No
Okay.
apostrophe in the can. ican'twaitbook.com. What you'll find there is the book and some notes, but that's also where those videos are that I mentioned. There's a video for each of the 52 stories, where you can go and watch a 3.5-minute video on Virgil or Louis or Lucy. And sometimes watching videos helps a little bit for some minds. So ican'twaitbook.com, and then growingleaders.com is our site where we have the images and the ones we use to teach leadership. So I hope it can add value to some of your listeners. Yeah.
Oh, I know it does. I've been following you at Growing Leaders for a while, and any person, any adult who cares about these things, that's one place definitely I want to encourage you to go. Dr. Tim, this has been such a joy. I want to thank you again for being
My
here.
pleasure. Carol, thanks for letting me spend some time with you. It's been great for me as well. Thanks.
And many blessings to you and your work.
Thanks. Vice versa.
Check the links, folks, under this video. ican'twaitbook.com, growingleaders.com. We also have a few other links there to Dr. Elmore's resources. Some really, really good stuff. If there is a child or young person in your life that you care about, this is something you need. And I just want one more time to relate it to a topic we keep coming back to regularly on this program, and that is the area of intimacy and relationships and matters of the heart around all of that. Addressing, connecting with the young people in your life in this way, with stories, with creativity, and helping their passions, helping them become leaders. A lot of the areas around intimacy and sexuality, those two things are related but not the same. A lot of those questions will find a place to be worked out. So it absolutely relates to what we address frequently here on this program. And I want to encourage you to leave a comment under this video. Make sure you're subscribed. I also would welcome a confidential comment from you over on my website, drcarolministries.com. You can use the contact page there, and that's the way to get me a confidential comment. I want to thank you again for being part of this program, and I'll see you again next time. God bless you.